I forget, to review some procedures or?
No, everyone here online are folks that we know. Just, the general rules, same as the city council. We'll call on you, use your raise hand function. And we'll get to call on you when we get to the questions.
Right, does somebody want to move approval of the agenda? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Motion by John, second by Tim.
okay. Comments from the chair? I have no comments this evening. General business, I'm assuming that most people are here for the public input session and plan to make their comments there, but if not, if you have comments about something else, please share them. Okay.
Carolyn, do you?
Carolyn's here for the city plan comments, it looks like.
Yes, and I realize that I'm kind of speaking out of order, but I need to go to another meeting shortly. And what I want to speak to is the section that comes up later, which is about the Berry Street Rec Center improvements. And what I'm concerned about is accessibility. And this isn't new to a lot of you, that this has been a concern of mine, that the building is simply not accessible. In 2018, the ADA committee did an ADA transition plan. And it seems to have been kind of set aside, but it outlines what's actually needed. In 2023, there was the 55 Berry Street feasibility study that was done, which I think is providing guidance for going forward. And again, I don't see much mention about handicapped accessibility. So the comment I want to insert is that be taken into consideration. And when you start to build the financing around it, you consider the ADA requirements as far as cost, because there are cost considerations that need to be addressed when doing the contracting and so forth. So I think that's pretty much what I have to say, that I really want to see that receives appropriate attention.
Okay. Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. We did put in, I know an earlier comment you made was wanted to have put into one of the goals, prioritizing when it came to the capital planning, to prioritize accessibility and things in the transition plan. And while I can't find that right off the top of my head, I know that change was made. So it has been reflected at the goal level, but I will look at the recreation center specifically to make sure that note is in there. So, all right. Thank you, Carolyn.
It could be the develop a Berry Street recreation facility plan online. It looks like it's printed to the right of that picture of the hockey image. And it says this facility will need $6 million to remediate hazardous materials and make it accessible for ADA. Is that what the goal that you were looking for?
Well, that's the strategy. That's where we would have put it. And so,
Okay.
yes, so that does reflect the need for the ADA for the Berry Street Recreation Facility. I just know there was also one maybe under utilities and facilities. Maybe I don't have that one printed out right in front of me. That it was at a goal level that we were talking about improving the facilities with a prioritizing accessibility. But we'll double check that one. Looks like Peter has a question.
Yeah, I have a process question. Am I correct that this is the last public input meeting on the chapters, and then 2 weeks from now, is going to be the official public hearings starting?
Yes, basically, while we warned the hearing, but obviously it takes more than 30 days, so it takes about 5 weeks to go through once you've warned it. So we didn't want to not give the public an opportunity to comment while the plan was waiting for the hearing. So yes, this is the last public input session before the public hearing, but the only difference is today, the planning commission can't vote to make any changes today. We would take all the comments, hold them, and then we'll have a list formed for the 24th where we can vote on those comments that we received tonight. So we won't be able to actually make any changes tonight, but we certainly can take input and we can certainly discuss it.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. Are any of the people or committees or commissions or departments who contributed to land use, resiliency, community services, parks, rec, MSAC, cemeteries, et cetera, are any of them here tonight?
I don't know if I don't know if Carolyn is on, I don't know if on the housing or any of those committees. So no, I don't know. I don't believe you or Joe or Thomas Weiss is here in person. So I don't believe any of them are here.
Do you expect to have people who contributed to this plan be present at the public hearings starting on the 24th?
We would hope to, but it's that would be up to the members of those committees and commissions. Certainly everybody's aware that the hearing is going on. I've gotten input from various departments, but I haven't gotten input from committees yet. Although I know there are a couple of committees. I take that back. I have heard from Historic Preservation. They are working on making a recommendation. But I haven't heard from others yet.
Well, I having read the entire plan again, I would like to suggest, Mike, that you reach out to them because there are some things in here that are ancient history, not to mention scads of editorial errors, but some of this stuff just doesn't look up to date. I can't believe that people from the homelessness task force have looked at this. If they did, they would tell you that there's stuff in here that just isn't happening or isn't going to happen. So I'm kind of concerned. I read the article about Country Club Road in the Bridge, and it says that the growth center application is due on September 30th. And in order to do that, doesn't this plan have to be done and accepted?
Yes.
This plan, the city plan. Isn't the city plan needed to make those applications?
Yes.
How are you going to get from this plan that has so many things that are problematic in it really worked out in time to get this through public hearings, cleaned up, and approved by the city council by September 30th?
Well, that's what we're going to find out because we've been, this has been out for input and for comment all
For a
through
year.
this year. And, if we take another year to work on it, then by that time, a bunch of the work that happened is going to be out of date. So at a certain point, we've got to move forward. And if anyone wants to give us comments of what's out of date, we're more than welcome to review and make those edits at this time. But at a certain point, we have to make a decision that we're going to advance the project and move it forward. We can't be developing the plan forever.
Well, I totally agree. And I think that time is actually passed. Um, and I'm sorry, but unless there is a proactive attempt by you and the commission to get people to come to the meeting, you're going to get the kind of attendance that you've been getting, which is almost none.
Peter, I invite you to take a collaborative approach to problem solving with us. So maybe Mike can, I mean, it's not that difficult to send out an email to the committee heads, I assume, even though you're very
I'll
busy
work with,
too.
I can work with Evelyn to
invite them
send out
to-
another notice about it.
Okay, maybe we could do that.
What is this? You want me to take a collaborative approach? What do you mean?
I just mean, if there's a problem that you're identifying, maybe you could, just take a approach to help us think about the problem together.
That's what I am doing. That's why I came tonight.
Okay. All right.
Because
misunderstood.
I've come to a number of these sessions. I've seen a handful of people. This needs this not only needs people to come, it needs the people who actually understand some of the chapters, the content. I
think that's wonderful. I just heard your comments as critical, so I was inviting you to.
I started out by saying I would suggest to you, Mike, that you make a proactive attempt to get people there. That is a positive suggestion. And you know what? I really resent you every time I come here implying that I'm just being critical. I have made hundreds of suggestions, and you all have taken many of them, which I'm glad about. But I focused on the housing-ish chapter. There are other chapters besides the housing chapter. The housing chapter is greatly improved. But I'm looking at some of these other chapters, and I can't believe that people have actually looked at this. And I think that they need to. And I'm making a positive suggestion that you reach out to MSAC, to the rec people, to the Housing Commission. How about, for example, to the Montpelier Commission for Resiliency and Recovery? If you reach out to them, reach out to the Disaster Recovery Organization, reach out to whoever is doing Maple, get them in here.
There's actually been quite a lot of outreach. I've worked very closely with John on the resilience chapter and all those pieces, and their organization is the one that drafted the Maple plan. So yes, from that standpoint, the resilience plan has been very, very closely worked with the folks in the Montpelier Resilience and Recovery Commission. So in that case, yes, and it's been very recent, and they're still working on it right now. So.
I assumed that when reading it, I assumed that was the case, which is why I think since they're evidently not there today, that you reach out to John and Ben and so forth and say, please come to the meetings starting on the 24th so that you can answer questions that the public may have. That's my suggestion. Get the people who know there. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to jump
Okay.
into the city plan?
I think, yeah, let's go for it if there's no other general business.
All right, so I'm gonna go through the presentation because I also know there are members of the public who watch this at a later date. Some people who watch it online on YouTube and other things. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I apologize to anyone who has seen this before. We've gone through this before, but for everyone who's new and you want to understand what is the Montpelier City Plan 2025, we're going to go through about a 10-minute presentation here, and then we'll take an opportunity to look actually at the website online or some of the boards, and we can answer questions that come up. So a little bit of, we'll go through a little background and history. What's the city plan? Why is it important? We'll talk about the fact there are 12 chapters and 2 parts. You're going to hear me say that a lot. And then our overall input process, and then the rest of tonight. So where to find the plan? So the plan is found, we've tried to put it in as many places on the city plan as on the city website as possible now. So one of them is if you go to the main page and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see this box. It says popular links, and on the bottom left, you'll see City Plan 2025. And then you can also scroll down lower, and there are bigger tiles. There's a City Plan 2025 there. If you go to the Planning Commission page, if you go up the boards and commissions, you can go to the Planning Commission page. That also has a direct link to City Plan 2025. So I believe there are 5 different links all going to the page at this point in various locations around. So hopefully, if you can't find one, you can reach out to me and I will point you in the right direction. So yes, if you were to scroll down from that, you would end up here where you've got a City Plan 2025 as well. And as I mentioned on the Planning Commission page, we also have the city plan. It is in the main text and it's on the left. So when you go to the city plan, this is the city plan welcome page. So there are 3 tabs you'll see. There's the welcome, the plan chapters, and the additional resources. And so the opening page, I guess I'll back up. The opening page has a general introduction, hopefully for the public hearing, after the public hearing, because we can't put it on till after. We will have a video that will help you navigate through the city plan. How do I find what I'm looking for in the city plan? That little video, it'll have a couple minute video that'll help you navigate through the plan. This opening page talks about some of the other pieces that we will show about why is a plan important? How is this plan developed? The second tab is plan chapters, which if you hit that, you'd come to this page where this just shows the top 2, the land use and the housing, but there are tiles for each one of these, and below each one is a link to the storyboard, the PDF of the storyboard, and the implementation plan. And we will go through each one of those pieces later on. And then if you go to the last of the 3 tabs, you'll go to additional resources. At this point, the only thing under additional resources are the archive versions. So everything that you've seen here, a PDF of the landing page, a PDF of the combined storyboards. So you can find individual storyboards on that plan chapter page, but we've combined them all into one. We also have a combined implementation plan. And then there's also the full archival Montpelier City Plan 2025. So these are not formatted and looking nice. They because the plan is what we were just looking at. The plan is these websites and these storyboards. And so this is meant to be archival, the way that you can access them and print them out, because the others don't print out well. So, but we will make some changes to that going forward as well, potentially. So some background and history. For the past 50 years, this document has been called the Montpelier Master Plan. And that was true when it was updated in 2010 and amended in 2017. This 2025 plan has a completely new format and content, including the fact that we changed the name of the plan to the Montpelier City Plan 2025. And the reason for that is really a master plan is really a term of art. It's used in planning, it's used in landscape architecture, but what we have is a city plan. It is not a master plan. A master plan is a different thing. So because of that, we decided that we would simply correct the name in this version and just call it the Montpelier City Plan. So this update started in 2016, developing goals and strategies, working with various committees and commissions. One of the first big changes is that we chose to go with a web-based plan format with separate chapters for each topic. So that changed the format of the existing plan completely. So we now have 12 chapters to meet the different subject areas like housing or energy or transportation. And we'll get into that as well. There's also a new format for the aspiration goals and strategies. So these are how we implement the plan. And the goal of this was to make it a much more actionable plan, especially compared to the current plan. So we worked with various committees to develop these to try to make sure that the housing plan reflects the goals of the Housing Commission. Of course, this took a long time. So we did have to go through and try to correct for some of those time differences, because if somebody did their plan earlier, then it might not be up to date. If we did an energy plan in 2018, it wouldn't be up to date in 2024. So we've had to update some of those older plans. City plans are valid for 8 years. So what is a city plan and why is it important? Plans are not required under state law, but you do need them if you want to adopt or update your zoning. So that's one of the things. You also need a city plan if you want to influence state proceedings through Act 250 or Section 248. They're necessary requirements for many state and federal grants. So they're not required, but it's really a good idea for all municipalities, whether it's a city plan or a town plan, to have one of these documents in effect. And they are, if you're going to have a city plan, though, you have to meet certain requirements. And these are the 4 requirements that are required under state law. So how can a city plan be used? I'm not going to go through this whole list, but really a city plan is a foundational document. It's where we can come down with a common set of long-term goals. This is less of an annual plan than it is, it's the long-term vision. Where are we going? And what are all of the things that we're going to do to try to get there? Understanding that a lot of our things, making more affordable housing, is not something that happens in the immediate term, but happens due to a lot of long-term decisions that we will be making and putting into effect. And in combination, they will help achieve our goals. So the Planning Commission goals, when we started this, which I mentioned earlier, it was for the storyboards to give the public and decision makers the background on a topic. So when we talk about the storyboards, when we talk about the chapters, that's really meant to be those background information. Why is this important? What are we trying to accomplish? And how are we going to achieve them? The second goal was for the strategies to detail the implementation plans, that actionable plan. So we really had 2 big goals. One was to make the storyboard, have it interactive, have people interested in it. The city plan generally gets very little use. It ends up being, unfortunately, a shelf document for a lot of times. And we wanted to try to get it online and get it more interactive, more accessible to the public. And really those storyboards were an interactive and hopefully interesting way for people to get involved. The implementation plans are a little bit more, I like to use the word wonky, and very detailed of what are the very specific steps that we hope that the committees and the city council and the staff really make sure that they continue to address over the short term and the life of the plan to continue to implement those steps. The overall process. So we're finally at the end. We started this out with the 12 chapters, and we were going to review 3 chapters at a time. We are now in that last third of the 12 chapters. We reviewed 3 at a time over the past year, each with different input opportunities, plus comments online and through surveys. We had a table at the farmers market, and this is the final set of public input leading to the public hearing on March 24th. So the 3 chapters that are tonight, and again, these are the 3 topics, but everything is open to input. If people have any thoughts or comments, we are open to anything in any of the pages and any of the stories. But we're going to focus the presentation on these 3 because these are the last 3 that hadn't been combed through as much as the others. All the others have had more input opportunities. There are 3 chapters, 2 parts each. Each chapter has a storyboard, as we mentioned. Each chapter has an implementation strategy. Right now, they're all 24 pieces are on the new City Plan 2025 website. So everything is available. The full plan is warned. Each storyboard is in a web-based format. It follows a consistent context and format. Each implementation strategy also follows the same, has a similar format through all the chapters. And the strategies are the actionable pieces to achieve the goals. And some strategies are new and some are existing ones. So that's confused some people, that they think, well, we should be just talking about what are the new things we're going to do. But we thought it was important to also talk about what are the things that we are doing that we should just continue doing. So those boards have a lot of things that say, continue to do this, or do something new, or amend something that we're doing. And just for example, these are an example, on the left is the storyboard and on the right are the implementation plans. Just so you have a sense of what they look like when we're talking about the implementation plans. We're talking about what you see on the right. When we're talking about the storyboards or the chapters, we're talking about what's on the left. So I'm going to leave the PowerPoint and bring up each of the storyboards and strategies, or we'll walk through whatever ones we want. I'll do land use because that's generally the one that gets the most attention, but I can pull up any chapter, any storyboard, and we can take input, comment, answer questions. What do you like? What do you don't like? Do you have specific questions? It really, this is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to hear from you on how everything went. And if you're looking to contact me, I'm Mike Miller, mmiller@montpelier-vt.org. Let me just jump out of this. And, jump back into here. So, this is the Montpelier City Plan. As we said, this is the actual city plan now. It's now an online document. This allows new features like interactive maps to better connect you, the public, decision makers, and staff to our collective aspirations and what actions we plan to take to achieve them. We hope you find this approach more interesting and informative. Please take advantage of our feedback opportunities to send us comments. So, and again, we hope to have this video pulled up for next time. That will help give people the clues on how to navigate it. So this is the welcome page. So why do we need a city plan? How was this plan developed? A lot of this we went over in the PowerPoint. Comment on the regional impacts, and a thank you from me to everybody, public, commissioners, and my staff and different folks we've worked with to make this plan happen. This was a lot of work. If you click the tab for the plan chapters, again, this will pull up this page where, as I mentioned, we have 12 chapters. Under each one, you'll see there's a story map, PDF, and an implementation plan. So that's the chapter. We'll go through each one of these, the PDF implementation. The chapters, if you're trying to know what are the 12 chapters, they are land use, housing, utilities and facilities, economic development, resilience, historic resources, energy, arts and culture, transportation, natural resources, public safety and community justice, and community services. So let me open the land use story map first. So if you were to click on that, you would come to the land use. And obviously, once this is done, it won't say draft public hearing. That has to be there to keep it in the banner, guiding Montpelier for years to come. Each chapter has the same topics: introduction, planning context, synergies, implementation summary, and who's involved. So these go through a conversation, a brief introduction. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, of what are the goals of the land use plan, the plan context. So in this case, this map includes information found in maps used in other chapters of the town plan. So this is about bringing things together. The land use plan uses maps from other chapters to create a set of future land use maps. A future land use map to define areas, a zoning map used in local regulations, and a state designation map used in state level programming. So these are some of the layers that are pulled forward. Yeah, I'll just click on designated downtown. Each one of these maps has a legend. They are, you can move around in them. So you can grab with your hand and move them around or zoom in and zoom out. You can't use the wheel to zoom in and zoom out because that moves you in the plan document. So, but it does give you opportunities to kind of take a look at what are the various topics. Open space, this is the Parks Commission green print. And again, so people understand we have both statutory requirements as well as wanting to explain things and educate the public on things. So a number of these are things that are required under statute. So in the land use plan, we have to address open space, forest blocks, and wetlands. And so a number of these are here because they're required to be here, but we also think it's just a good idea. These are all the things we're trying to pull together so people can understand the background of how we make these determinations down here. There's also a requirement for a current land use map. So this shows us where the residential, non-residential buildings are. What is the actual, what we call a land use land cover for Montpelier. And then we get to the future land use map. And this map has designations based on what are in the state system. And I'm already going to tell you that we are working on a draft revision to this map. We sent this to the state. The state is doing an entire statewide. There are very particular rules on how to develop this future land use map. And we developed it using their descriptions. So remember, I showed you from the CVRPC, they gave us the descriptions of all these districts. So we looked at those descriptions and applied them to what we thought they were appropriate to. The state came in and said, well, actually, there's a methodology for making these determinations. And so we're currently going through that very detailed step-by-step methodology, and things are coming out in different districts. So we will show you the future land use map that follows the methodology at the meeting on the 24th. So we already know this will be revised, but the ideas are still the same, and some of them haven't changed. For example, I think the downtown district remained pretty much the same, but the planned growth area actually includes more of the residential neighborhoods. So, you know, there are going to be a number of changes. We'll go through them and explain it after the public hearing or at the public hearing when we're actually allowed to make some changes to it. This is the current zoning map. Again, you know, there were some questions at the state as to whether or not we need to have this map in here. I think it's helpful. They suggested maybe putting in a qualifier over here that the zoning map is the zoning map as of 2025. So that way, if somebody were looking at this plan in 2029, they would know that this plan was adopted in 2025. The map may have changed since then. So.
And Mike, when do you anticipate having that revision?
Of the future land use map? Later this week. Nick has been working on it. He got through all the downtown. Nick is currently working on the rural districts. And he said that's actually some of the hardest ones to work through the methodology on.
And is that revision going to be able to be reviewed as part of the public hearing or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it won't be in the document because I can't make that
Right.
change, but I will have PDFs of the actual maps themselves to hand out or to pull up online so we can take a look at them.
A document of criteria?
Yeah, I hadn't seen before. Apparently it's what the state law says, because we don't have to use their future land use map. There was a state law, I think it's Act 181, maybe, that went through and said that all the regional plans in the state have to start using a consistent format. So VCGI and some of the state commissions went through and developed a methodology and a set of various districts, which have these names: rural conservation. I think they call it rural ag and forest. We split it into two, but well, may have to put them back together again. We'll have to see how that goes. Planned growth area, enterprise, and there are a number of others that we don't have. So there's like village area, village growth area, but we don't have any villages. So there's a number of classifications, but apparently there is a very specific process you're supposed to go through, a methodology for identifying which ones go in which districts. So that way, our map in Montpelier would be consistent if you were to compare it to Middlebury's map. Our downtown should roughly match what their downtown in the various type characters, and their residential neighborhoods would be classified the same way as ours on the regional plan maps. Because those haven't been developed yet, regional planning commissions are required to develop them. We chose, and we had the conversation about it as a commission, that we should try to do our best to match our future land use map to that map. So that way we're kind of giving them, kind of nudging them in the direction. This is what we would like you to classify things as, because we think this is the appropriate classification. And we'll see where it goes. If this doesn't look like, if we get done and we look at it, we're like, well, that's not what we think our future land use map is. Ultimately, we're saying what our future land use map should be, what our future land use should look like. And if that map isn't consistent and we say that just doesn't reflect what our goals are, then I would say we take it out and we do something different. But if we put it all together and we're like, yeah, that's actually a pretty good representation following the state model, then I think it would be a good idea for us to keep it. So we'll see where it goes. Some of these won't change, some of these will. I don't know if we want to take a quick comment or if you want me to finish going through this.
You should finish going through it before we take
Okay.
comments.
So I'll finish going through this board, and then we'll take we'll take some comments after I finish this, going through this board real quick. So that's zoning. So potential designations. This reflects some of the conversations that have been going on about Country Club Road. The green area is our existing designated downtown. The brown area is our existing growth center. We are making proposals to add in Country Club Road. That's been well known. We also have had conversations about whether we should expand some of our other areas that qualify for the growth center. So the orange areas also qualify to be added to our growth area. And that would be up to the the city council if they want to vote to add that in. The tan areas also could be added. The only thing they're missing are sidewalks. They don't have sidewalks, so we would have to have some type of addressing of pedestrian amenities to have that approved at the state levels. But this map kind of reflects some of those. And again, I mentioned the Country Club Road site, mentioning the actionable plan. And this will come up later. This is also the preferred concept for the CCR. This will be on the council on Wednesday. If anyone wants to see the presentation on the Country Club Road, I will be giving a presentation on the Country Club Road on Wednesday. Synergies. So the third section is synergies. Every chapter talks about these. How does land use relate to other goals of the Montpelier City Plan? So we really wanted to reflect the fact that no matter which topic you're talking about, it has overlap and it relates to other chapters. And so, it's difficult. You can see something like public transportation could be talked about in the public transportation chapter. It could be talked about in energy because it's a way of reducing energy. It could be talked about natural resources, for, minimizing, air pollution. So there's a lot of different things that we could talk about a topic like that. In land use, these were the 6 chapters that really kind of feed the land use chapter, and the land use chapter influences the most. So that's what synergies is all about, is looking at, how your uses makes it important. Like housing located near mixed use and urban densities allows for a more walkable and bikeable city. Land use plan guides where areas are located. The new housing development should be accessible to complete street networks to and from downtown and other mixed use areas. The plan bridges the idea of a town that can be effectively navigated without a personal motor vehicle to a reality where pedestrian travel is convenient and practical. And I'll note another typo every time I read this, I find one more. So each of these, whether it's economic development, natural resources, these are all related. So the implementation summary is the 4th section. So these are exactly word for word what is in the implementation plans. So this just gives an idea of what the aspiration is. Montpelier will have a resilient, historic urban center with complementary mixed-use commercial and industrial areas surrounded by residential neighborhoods to grow the community and region. That's our aspiration. That's what we've stated is our aspiration. And then we have, I believe, 4 goals. And then a second aspiration, Montpelier's future will include protected and conserved areas that provide recreational opportunities and protect sensitive natural resources. Because our land uses are both what we use and what we protect. So there's kind of one set of goals about how we are using and developing, and another set of how we have areas that we aren't going to use and develop. And that's really kind of captures what the land use plan is trying to do. Then we have an implementation summary, and this looks at those implementation boards, and I will show you what the implementation board looks like, and it summarizes it into just a written text of what we're trying to do. Unified development regulations, those are your zoning regulations, are the primary tool for organizing a community. Regulations define uses and densities in each area of the city, outlining, for example, in which areas will be used for housing and which will be used for commercial purposes. This arrangement in the regulations and zoning map is critical to ensuring that the goals and aspirations of the town plan are achievable. And then who's involved, who is responsible, and mostly this falls on the Planning Commission for developing the regulations and administered through the zoning regulations, and a number of other places in here, including departments Montpelier Alive. And if you click there, or if you were to go back up, you'd come to the actual land use plan, the same aspirations we just talked about, the 5 goals that we just talked about, and then a number of strategies. So the strategies include to continue to implement the Country Club Road actionable plan. Then there's a description, and this is true of all of the strategies. There's an action that we're going to take, continue to implement the Country Club Road in this case, Country Club Road plan, a description of what that means. In this case, there's a link to the actual plan itself. What's the priority? This is a high priority. It will be a high cost project. It implements goals 1, 2, and 3. So we've got goals 1, 2, and 3. So this strategy implements those 3 goals. And then who's responsible? This falls on the planning department, and it is a project. So we define each one of our strategies in one of 5 ways. We have projects, programs, plans, policies, and permits. So we have a number of strategies. Continue, again, we talk about this. We already have an capital improvement program, sometimes called a CIP. That is a continue. Others are doing something. Let me see if I've got anything. That's update the green print. So that's kind of an amend and continue to administer. Other chapters will have things that will talk about doing something new or different. So I will let me take a moment to, I'll hit stop share, but let's, just so we can get a couple of comments and then we can jump back in. There's specific comments on the land use that you want. We got Thomas. Thomas, can you come up to the microphone so we can hear you?
I'll talk loudly.
Well, we really need, if people are going to hear you at home, you really have to be near the microphone or stand at the podium, one or the other, to be heard.
Well, I'll stand at the podium. I'm not going to stand in front of that camera.
Okay, no, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Thomas Weiss. I'm a resident of District 2, and I was under the impression that tonight was going to be an informational session for those of us seeking information on the plan, so that we could make intelligent and meaningful comments at the public hearing. Because my impression of a public hearing is that it's really a set of one-way conversations rather than a two-way conversation. People give input and we never get answers back, and eventually we get an answer back. So on Tuesday, I gave Mike a letter, which I believe he emailed out to all of you with the kinds of questions on the information that I have, and I thought of a few new ones. Since then, I've noticed, well, my question is, how does one make a copy of a portion of the map? And I'll give you a little background. As Mike's introduction mentioned, the plan is important in zoning considerations. The questions for permits that ask, is it in compliance with the city plan? So I couldn't figure out how to make a copy of a portion of the map so that I could submit it as testimony. So can someone tell me how that happens, or can it happen?
All right, so some of the pieces. Getting to. On the plan chapters. Making a story map.
I mean, I went to the plans, the maps, future
Yep.
land use map, and I tried to highlight it, and I couldn't so I could screen share it or something, the portion that I wanted, and it didn't work. So the question really is, how does one make an appropriate copy to give to the Act 250 District Commission, to give to the Department of Environmental Conservation for one of their permits?
If there's a specific, we can take screenshots of them, which is what we typically do. But I can ask.
But I couldn't do that because whenever I tried to do a screenshot of a portion, it just moved the map around.
There's also the PDF downloads for
each of the chapters, and that has.
But the PDF download doesn't have the interactive map that I can.
No, it's not
does it?
interactive.
Hmm?
You're right. It's not interactive. But it's a.
But if I am working on a small project that involves 3 city lots, how do I get that off the PDF map?
I'm not sure if. Well, the city plan isn't going to have all of that information available in all of the maps. The city of Montpelier does have other resources for GIS mapping that includes parcels, zoom in, get that information. That's
But
not
that's
going to.
not part of the plan, and that's not what the Act 250 Commission asks for.
But you
They
can't
ask
do
for,
that
is
right
this
now.
in compliance with the plan?
You can't do that right now on a PDF plan. If you were to take our PDF plan, you'd just get a very general. It's just a map on a 8.5 by 11. That's what exists today. So this is not making a condition that's any worse than where we are today.
Well, I'm used to maps that are at least full size 24 by 36, if not even bigger, so that one can take a portion. Anyway, that's that question. Are there any parts of the plan that are subject? Talking to Mike, it appears that that some of these maps are linked to a database. That's correct.
These are all in this. So this website is ArcGIS. So this is in an Esri product. The storyboards are built in. So all of these are not taking data from somewhere else. This is part of, I would need to bring in my GIS person to give the exact professional terms for each one of these things, but these are all shape files that are part of this project, and this project is here. So
Okay.
if somebody is changing something somewhere else, it can't change this, and it won't change this because
Thank
this
you.
has
That
to be a
answers my
fixed
question,
document.
and
Which-
that'll eliminate some comments for 2 weeks from now.
Which,
Yeah.
which let me just mention is also intentional. This is not a dynamic living document. This is a snapshot in time,
Okay,
and that is intentional.
great. Um, And I had some other questions relating to how long this will be available. I also do research and like to know, for example, how plans evolve over time. So if somebody's doing this 30 or 40 years from now and it's all digital, how does somebody get the data to be able to do that?
So this is going to be, there are going to be the legal requirements, and they're going to be what would be nice and desirable. So from a legal standpoint, the municipal plans, according to the Secretary of State's office, are required to exist for the life of the plan plus 3 years. So at that point, we could legally take a box of all of our old plans and shred them. There's no legal reason and requirement for us to keep them. That said, we keep them all because they're important. They're a resource that other people want to come back and check with. But from the legal standpoint, they have to last a certain amount of time. Now, the expectation is that we'll keep this as live as long as we can. It's just data points. And, at some point, as Thomas points out, some things are going to change over time. We don't have floppy disks. We don't have things running that we had 20 years ago. In 20 years, who knows what systems will be the system of choice. But all the data layers all have to be sent to VCGI, which is the state data layer. So these are all accessible at the state. But this will also have those archived versions. All of Thomas's questions have been sent to our city attorney so he can review them, make sure there isn't anything in here that we are legally missing and required to have. One of the recommendations that we received up front, we haven't gotten the legal review back yet. But one of the early ones was he felt that the archive PDF that we have, the one that's right there, that would have the printed copy that obviously we could bind that and put that in the vault, or there are a lot of things we could do to have an archived copy. He felt it should have the cover and the table of contents, so that way the various chapters would be accessible. We can always make one archival or a set of archival copies that could have the tabs, could be tabbed and everything else if we wanted to. But they would probably have to be numbered in such a way that it's like the first chapter is 1-1, 1-2, 1-3. The second chapter would be 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, just because of how this document is assembled based on the fact that it's PDFs of web pages. So we would probably have a set of documents that would work in that way. And then we could print out those 11 by 17s and fold them in the back to have so that way we could make an archival copy that would be available into the future in the event that somebody wants to do it. But what would happen? Over the long term, I don't know, but at least there would be an archived copy that would be there that would have all the words on it. And the data layers themselves may over time not be available. I think we've talked about, do we want to make a map book? I think our decision was no, we wouldn't make the map book because it's going to make things. As soon as you make the map, it's got certain features that are going to make it. The online version is the online is the web is the plan. And as soon as you make that other map, the more times you make the map, the more likely you are you have to use the exact same data and make it look the exact same way. And if one pulls a roadmap from one data source and the other one pulls a roadmap from a different data source, it's going to look a little different. And that's going to lead to a confusion in an Act 250 hearing of, well, which one is the right one? Is it that map that's online, or is it this map over here that's the printout map that was made? And we want to have as few of those as possible. That's why the PDF version has to be exactly the same, because we literally took the website and PDF'd the images. So it has to be the exact same images. So that was a little bit of some of the things, but we do have our attorneys looking at it to make sure there aren't any other technical pieces that will come up as an issue. But we will look to see if there are ways of making a printing out of a map and see if that's a feature that could be added relatively easily, or if that's something that is not possible. I'm not the GIS person. I've got him in my office.
I appreciate you allowing me to take so much time. I've got one more comment. I would appreciate something, well, maybe it's not necessary. For the PDF copy, a table of contents would be highly useful. And I'm not sure whether on the welcome page, putting that table of contents with links to all the other pages. So it says, storyboard for chapter 3. And you'd click on that, it would go immediately there rather than having to go through maybe 2 or 3 pages. I appreciate your giving me so much time tonight, and then Mike and you who have been answering my questions as well. Some of the answers that I'll need to not make egregious miscomments in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I think Pierre has his hand raised as well.
I'd just like to make a few suggestions. The first one actually has to, this wasn't first, but since we were just talking about the data. One of the commissioners mentioned a particular map, or somebody mentioned a particular map that should be noted that it was a snapshot in time. All of these are snapshots in time. And I think that dates should be provided for all story map data slides so that people understand that these so-called interactive maps are just snapshots in time. I think it's really important, because otherwise there's going to be misunderstanding. The second, I already actually made this comment earlier, but I think that all possibly relevant committees, organizations, and departments should be given one last opportunity to read and make recommended changes to the penultimate draft. And in particular, city council members, the city manager, department heads, as well as the committees of some overarching missions, such as the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee, the ADA Committee, the Youth Committee, should be asked to read and offer their input. Again, this is what I was talking about, proactively reaching out so that you don't later have comments about, hey, what about this? What about that? You didn't, try to get some of these other groups, really try to get them to read it. The entire document needs to be copy edited by a professional copy editor who has not been involved in its authorship. I was in publishing for much of my career. You have to do this. You cannot have your own people, the people who worked on the writing, and you can't just depend on Evelyn. And I'm going to get back to this in a minute. You need to hire a professional copy editor and a professional proofreader. And those are 2 different things. Those are two different things. There are tons of typos and left out words and so forth in here that a professional proofreader would catch and would be able to fix. Similarly, there are lots of stylistic issues. I think that Aaron did a terrific job on a lot of it, but he didn't get to all of it. And I'm not sure that he will be able to. You need a professional copy editor to do this. Most of the strategy sections of each chapter, I think, need to make clearer what is really new. Mike commented, and I was going to say, so many of this stuff is continued. I think that you need to look more carefully at those continued and see whether there are whether it's modify, add to, expand, a little more than otherwise it looked like continued. That doesn't look good for a plan that the previous plan was, written in 2008 and approved in 2010, and then reapproved and then reapproved. Specifically, again, related to the data, Mike claims and hopes that this so-called interactivity is going to engage people. I personally don't think it is, but let's see, okay? But I'll tell you one thing I do know, because I was involved with technology publishing for many years, that people have much higher and different expectations. In fact, just now, Thomas's questions got at that. They have different and higher expectations of something that is online. And in fact, this whole thing is a snapshot. So putting it on the web, keeping this up to date would have been really problematic. But if it's just a snapshot, it's not going to be as much of a problem. But some of this stuff is going to start looking very creaky very quickly. In fact, some of it already looks creaky. How are we going to do this, especially since with the recent budget and staff reductions, which are going to affect Evelyn and I can't remember his name, the tech guy, and the contract with the SE group has got to end at some point. Maybe it's already ended. So maintenance of the web version is really not going to happen. So I commend you for taking my suggestion that there be a PDF version. But the PDF version is also just a snapshot. Somewhere you've got to have a plan, Mike, for starting to collect the changes. It can't wait until 8 years from now. So what I'm suggesting positively is that you start working on the 2030 plan now. As soon as this is approved, start collecting the changes that are going to have to be in the next plan and have those honestly be available and reviewable by all the relevant parties as you go. Don't wait until we get up against it. That's what happened in 2015. That's what happened in 2017. There wasn't time to look at it. And so there were just a couple of little changes that were made each time. And then finally, the welcome section. The welcome section, I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. You got to have that be rewritten so that it's more candid, more accurate. This Q&A, why do we need a city plan? Here's the answer. And the answer that's given here is not really why we need a city plan. Mike actually verbally explained why we need a city plan. It's to be able to qualify for other things. It's a different question than how will a city plan be used? And that's a very good question, because in fact, the way I have seen the city plan used is not by the implementers and the planners, but by the NIMBYs, the people who want to oppose things. And they go, oh, you can't do that. The city plan says X, Y, Z. And what city plan were they referring to? Because you heard this when you guys wanted to make zoning changes about a year ago. I think it was Thomas who kept saying that. Oh no, this is inconsistent with the city plan. The city plan, which was adopted in 2010 and slightly changed, And that's in fact how the city plan is used. It's misused. It's used as a hammer. And so there needs to be some thought given to how to prevent that or how to modify that or how to mitigate that. Because the real reason for city plan is that it's more or less required. It's not state mandated, but boy, it sure is, because otherwise we can't apply for various designations and so forth. So I hope you will think about really revising that introduction so it's more like Mike's presentation, not this Q&A, which does not work at all. So those are my suggestions for today. And I didn't know whether to make them today or whether to make them at the hearing. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
I just wanted to respond quickly to one part of that, if I can.
Who is talking?
Peter, this is Tim Sinnott.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. I think I might have said that this is just a snapshot. And Mike can correct me if I'm wrong here. But it shouldn't be called just a snapshot. It is a snapshot on purpose. It's an intentional snapshot. This is not a dynamic document. It's not static because we couldn't make it dynamic. It's static because it has to be static. This is the city plan 2025. So I think your suggestion of putting a timestamp basically on each one of these maps is a really good idea. But this was never intended to be dynamic, and actually it would be incorrect if it were dynamic going into the future. So yes, it is going to look, I think you said creaky in parts of it, and will look creaky almost immediately as, for instance, zoning continues to change, as things continue to change, as development continues to change. It will look old, but that's just simply going to be the case. That is how it is. In 2030, the 2025 city plan is still going to have those same maps in it. So I think being able to tell people that this is from 2025 and it is static and it's intentionally static is important. So I think that your suggestion of putting timestamps on is a very good one.
I thank you. I just like to add, it's not just that. I think it's got to be made very clear to people exactly what you just said. This whole plan is a snapshot now.
Yeah. And I hear you when you're talking about the interactivity of it, and people expect interactive things to be up to date. But if you look at the 2017 plan, maybe it's simply because it's a PDF or more static. It doesn't have its own website. People expect it to be this snapshot, but they're the same thing in a way. There's 2017 and there's 2025. Both of those are snapshots from when they were created. So I think making that clear is important.
But and see, Mike keeps referring to this as interactive.
It is interactive.
Don't think you should be stressing that. It's not really very interactive, and people hear interactive, they expect, like Thomas expected, that he could blow up the maps.
Well,
it's an expectation thing that I'm urging you to manage that. To say this is really, it's online because people aren't reading so much anymore. But for example, just that Thomas's suggestion about a table of contents that allows you to click and go to the right place. That's an expectation that anybody who uses the web today would want to see.
Yeah, the last thing I want to say is that this is the definition of an interactive map, an interactive website. It is not dynamic. So I just want to make that distinction. It's interactive, but not dynamic.
And I think at some point it was brought up adding a search function, which would be very helpful. If you're looking for a table of contents, to also have a search function to be one or the other, right?
Yep. Yeah. That was one that we had a small list of things that never made it over the finish line. And the search function was one of the ones that we didn't didn't get the vet. We don't know if we can or can't. So
Okay.
that's one that's on there. And just getting to the legality of whether a plan could be dynamic, that really actually, when we talked to our attorneys in 2016, they were like, it could be, it just depends how much legal risk we want to take, because no one's ever taken it to court. The state law is gray, so we wouldn't know. So his advice was, we're already taking the first step into an area that nobody has gone in. This is the first web-based plan. For us to try to go all the way could set ourselves up into a position where we put ourselves in a legal peril that we don't need to.
I can guarantee you that
technically-
somebody would.
Yeah.
Because what we had was a lot of people, especially, if you're talking about the energy committee and stuff, they wanted to see potentially like a dashboard that, if you get to 2027, that dashboard is continuing to grab data, and you can see these online. There's a lot of AI programs, and it grabs data and puts it in there. So that way the plan actually changes over time. And the question is, would that be legal or illegal if it's just grabbing data? And I'm sure if you get 10 attorneys, you'll get 10 opinions. Our attorney said, his advice was, let's take the first step. Let's make that first step. Let's adopt the plan. All the data within that plan must be fixed just as if it were a fixed plan. Now, we can obviously go in. When you're in that storyboard, you can zoom in on your house to go and say, oh, I can click on wetlands, and I could zoom in on that map to see, do I have a wetlands by my house? Now, the fact that we can't print that map out, legally not required, but all right, is there a way that we could make it printable? And I'll have to check on that to see if we can print out. Again, I was able to do a screen snapshot on my computer, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, but that's using something that's not built into
That's
the
not built in, yeah.
application itself. So if someone has that sort of third party, yeah, exactly. But if someone, right, and some mapping applications, you can do that. So I think that's sort of the question.
Yeah,
there.
we'll see if there's an easier way of doing that. But so just so we're clear, we have made sure that this document does not evolve over time. So, if the state comes out with a new wetlands layer, it's not going to be in this plan, because we have the wetlands layer that was in this plan when it was approved. And if the state comes out with a new layer, we would have to revise our city plan. And I think the last point, the only other point I wanted to make on Peter's comments was our hope with this plan is that it is much more in this, will be used in much the same way, or updated much the same way that our zoning regulations have. So it took us 7 years to adopt the zoning updates. And since that time, we've made annual updates every single year to that document to continually go through, catch errors, fix them, clean it up, make things, adjust to things because the economy, COVID, floods, we make changes based on what's going on. I want to see and expect to have this city plan work in that same way, that every year, and maybe it's something that triggers it, a recession. So we all decide, let's go and take a hard look at our economic development plan and make sure that it's in good shape. Or we have a flood. Let's look at our resilience plan. Is everything good? Are we in good shape? Do we need to make any revisions? And that way we can make amendments over time. Every single year, we're continuing to look at this to make these adjustments. So that way we can have a robust conversation in the same way that the one of the big comments of the 2017, 2018 zoning update was, it's just too much here. It's like, well, okay, well, now that we've adopted it, we're going to come back with a set of smaller changes, and we can have a really good conversation about solar shading. Do we want to have it or do we not want to have it? And we were able to have a robust conversation on that one topic to really come down to a decision of, do we want to keep that regulation or amend that regulation or remove that regulation? We had it here, we had it at city council, and eventually made a decision. And I would hope that the city plan will go the same way, that maybe people come up and after the plan is adopted, the decision is, you know, we should go back and look at the housing chapter again, because we don't think it, you know, or we have a bunch of comments, maybe the housing committee has a bunch of comments that they didn't get to us. Great, that's perfectly fine. We don't plan to wait 8 years to revisit this. Our hope is we're going to continue to amend it, and then we'll have hearings just on one set of topics, and we can really have an in-depth discussion of the policies of each one, because right now we're going to go into a public hearing and review 219 pages of PDF of written words and all the maps and all the implementation plans. And that there's a lot that's changed. There's a lot there to go through, but it will be a lot. But hopefully going forward, we'll take many more smaller bites over a period of time and hopefully be doing a better job of managing our city plan at the same time as managing our zoning regulations.
Thank you for that clarification. I do think that then it is important to take Peter's note about putting dates either on maps or in sections, because in the future, if in 2 years from now we can say revised this date 2027 for that section, for instance.
Mike, would these literally be amendments? I'm a little confused now. I thought this plan is this snapshot in time.
It would literally be an amendment. So under state law, there are 3 things you can do. You can adopt a plan, you can amend a plan, and you can re-adopt the plan. And so what I would envision over the next 5 or next 8 years is that we would amend the plan, which doesn't extend that 8-year deadline. You still have that 8-year deadline is good for, but you would develop a revised plan, and then the adoption process for an amendment is identical to readopting a plan. So there'd be public hearings, there'd be input, there'd be public hearings. It would go to city council, there'd be warned in the paper, all the same thing. Everything you have to do to adopt the plan is the same thing as amending the plan. So,
But Mike, where would that amended plan be? Would you need to go into the online version and change it, or would it only be in the PDF version?
no, it would revise online. No.
How are you going to afford to do that? Who's going to do that?
It's actually not that difficult, and we have a number of people in the city who have those skills, including Nick in my office, who's our most recent hire, and he's a GIS specialist. And in fact, we were able to get the wrap up the SE group contract. We had them because we needed somebody who could put a lot of work into it, and they did. We signed the contract with them. They put together about 95, 98%, and then we handed it over to Nick, and he did a lot of this last stuff to get it over the finish line. Was all Nick. So he works as our planning and zoning assistant, but he has a master's degree in GIS, and he works with DPW on some of their projects. So he's got a lot of experience. And if anything were to happen to him, he were to leave and take a new job, the RPC also has people who have these same skills. Building this takes a contract. Amending this is something that there's a lot of people with those skills for. And if we needed to, I mean, I think we built this whole website, the contract, a $40,000 contract was to build the entire thing. So think about just making an amendment. It's going to probably be a couple $1,000s if we had to go to a private consultant. But again, at this point, we can do everything in-house. Just so in case people don't know, this is Esri is the ArcGIS, and that's a company name, and that's the platform, but that is the preeminent GIS system that is used around the world. So it's a huge system, huge company that is not going anywhere. We own licenses because we already own the license. It's not something we had to purchase for this project. We already own it because most of all the cities, which is why you can go in and look at all of our sewer and water lines, all of our utilities are all mapped in GIS. It's just the basic platform that everything is done in nowadays. And so our DPW crew has probably 3 or 4 people who can do, at least 3 that can do GIS. And in the planning department, we have 2 that can do GIS. I used to be trained in GIS, but that was a long time ago. But the idea is this is not as hard. We own, as we said, we own the licenses. We didn't have to upgrade our licenses to have this, to be able to do this. It is now hosted. We host it. There's been a question about where it's housed. Although the name SE Group is in the title, we are trying to see if we can change our web address. Technically, they developed it, so it's got their name in the URL, but we own it and it's in our license. So it would be nice to change that to City of Montpelier, but we haven't quite gotten there yet to figure out if that is possible. But if SE Group went bankrupt, that wouldn't change our URL. We wouldn't lose that website in any way because we own that license and it's in our system. So, so yes, from an update standpoint, as I said, all of this has been very easy I've been surprised how easy it's been for Nick to make these updates. So.
I do see that we have Doug Zorsey joined. I don't know if he wanted to make any comments.
Oh, it looks like we lost Joe Castellano. I spoke with Doug, so I don't know if he'll have any comments. So he might be viewing. Doug is somebody we've been working with. But
Then
he's welcome.
I did have a question that if Doug isn't going to make a comment. I know that Peter brought up the copy editing and proofreading previously. Is that something that we're going to be able to have in the budget, or?
I haven't had it in the budget. I have to go and see what we've got available. I do know I have, after we got everything put online and after we warned it, I went through and I've got a stack of probably a number of the typos that Peter was referring to. So I have found a number of them and I will give you guys the list to go through and approve the typo changes.
Okay, so you found some.
I found some, but
changed,
again,
yeah.
he's not wrong. I mean, if it would be great. I've never in any plan development had copy editors go through. But obviously, if anybody has time to go through the plan and find any more typos, or if you want to wait for me to finish making my edits, so you're not finding all the ones I already know about, we should try to do our best to capture all of them. And you guys should review the welcome page. I mean, based on Peter's comments, if we want to rewrite things because stylistically it's clunky or doesn't work, you guys should take a look at that. Because that was one of the last sections that kind of got put together. So if you guys think that needs revisions, we can make revisions after the public hearing. But I will continue to look for the search function and I'll continue to look for the print function. And I think the video will help with some of the navigation pieces.
Mike, one other thought I was having during the comments. I wonder if some type of citation page as well might be helpful. That could also just sort of reiterate, this is how you would cite this document, the month, the year. I don't know where that falls in priority and pricing and, everything else, but just a suggestion that might help reiterate the point that this is the citation for this document.
Good point. So I don't know if as we said, we do have the other 2 chapters. But I don't know if we have folks that are looking for making comments on those or not. But Resilience, I will say, that is one we're still working with the commission on. They made a number of comments at the start, and they still had a couple of comments that they wanted to get to me. I gave them the deadline for the public hearing, so maybe we'll get some more comments and edits. But we certainly have had a number of them that they've made.
On to the next topic, the
Yeah, if we're all set, yeah. Oh, Peter Hellman has his hand raised.
Are you gonna take comments on the other chapters?
Oh, if you have comments on the other chapters, you're the only one left, so we'll take the rest of your comments if you've got more of them.
Well, all right, just first a question. Who has looked at the homelessness chapter, a section of the community services? Has the homelessness task force looked at this recently? I mean, I used to be on the homelessness task force. I left about 2 years ago. These look like things that we were talking about 2 years ago. Has this been updated?
So this was probably done 2 years ago. But I don't, so yes, I haven't heard anyone on changes on that.
I think Meredith from the homelessness task force did submit comments to us that were on the matrix that we
Yes.
discussed.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
made some, we have made some comments because we had a considerable set of discussions during the housing chapter about where we should emphasize homelessness. So we had a number of topics that were on homeless shelters that we wanted in housing, and some housing policies as they apply to homelessness were in the housing chapter. And then we had a number of other ones that we saved for community services, which was homelessness. So I can put it back out to them, but it was developed with them, I want to say mostly working through their chair at the time.
Through their chair at the time, you mean Ken Russell?
I think it was Ken Russell that we were working with.
But Meredith did make some comments recently, submitted some comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was last summer or fall, but she did submit comments. I remember that, and we discussed.
Okay, all right. Then let me just make a suggestion. First of all, to get her or maybe a few people from the task force. But the other is, maybe you need to back off a little bit in the specificity of saying, well, we've got the police department is open 24 hours a day. No, it isn't. Okay. I mean, part of the problem is there's so much specificity in here, and things have changed. The flood changed things. The pandemic changed things. The huge number of people who are out on the streets because of the state kicking them out of the motels changed things. This is really a moving target. So you might want to get maybe not to 30,000 feet, but maybe not down in the weeds. I would go through this and really pull out the things that are down in the weeds, especially things that describe what supposedly is the case. The bathrooms? No, that stuff is not happening. Maybe, how about making that aspirational? This is what should be happening. That's just my suggestion as a former member of the homelessness task force. I don't know, Mike, you probably caught this, but one of the, don't even remember which chapter it is anymore, but in the headline of the strategy, it says pursue, spelled P-E-R-S-U-E. I mean, honestly, you cannot proofread your own work. It's just not professional. I don't proofread my own work, and it's got lots of errors in it, but it's not public. It's not a public document. If I give it to my wife to proofread, she finds all kinds of stuff that I didn't see because you can't see it when you're so close to the document. And copy editing is a different issue. Copy editing is making something, actually rewriting it so that it says what it's meant to say. And so very often a copy editor will query the author and say, is this what you meant? If this is what you meant, here's the way to say it. Because English is a very tricky language, especially with, words ending in ing, which sometimes are nouns and sometimes are verbs. That's why they're professional copy editors. We have some in town, maybe even volunteer. Okay, that's all my comments. I mean, I thought the resiliency chapter looked to me like it has really been, you got very good input from some of the people who are more closely involved. But again, I think you need to be a little careful about getting down in the weeds, because I mean, when I saw FEMA in there, I don't know how many of you know how difficult it is to work with FEMA. I know Mike must, and I certainly do, because I own properties in Barry that that I can't do anything with because FEMA won't let me. So, and with the changes in the government now in Washington, God knows what FEMA is going to do. So just this is going to last for 7 or 8 years, even with amendments. We try to maybe pull back a little bit from specificity. I know that's weird to say, but I think you should consider it. All right, I'm going to go eat dinner. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Peter. All right, so we want to jump to the municipal planning grant topics. So there are a lot of options. Municipal planning grants, for everyone who doesn't know, that's every year we get the opportunity to apply for municipal planning grants. We can apply for up to, usually it changes, sometimes 20, sometimes about $30,000. And it's really the primary funding source that you guys get for working on zoning updates or plans or whatever we want to be working on. And there's certain, obviously, priorities that they're trying to work through. And one of them for this year is, again, it's been housing, and try to get those types of projects going. My thought for the municipal planning grant for this year would be to apply for, in order to do Country Club Road, we have to put in a TIF application, tax increment financing. And that'll pay for the utilities to go to the site and within the site. And so we have some of the money already set aside, but we don't have enough of the money. So my thought was, because we don't have a project imminent right now, that we would work on that. It sounds like a couple of the things we'll be talking about this year's work plan a little bit in the next item, but none of those seemed like things that we were going to be needing a consultant for. We've got the talent in-house to go and kind of work on those. So my thought was we would put the money towards the grant application to help with paying for TIF. If anybody has any other ideas? But the application is due the end of March, end of this month. So I'd have to kind of get lined up with what I'm applying for.
Can you give me some examples of projects or money things that you've put this grant money towards in the past to give me an idea?
We did, so the last one was for the SE group to do the city plan. We had one before that for DPW. They were trying to do some innovative scanning for the pavement condition index, the PCI. Historically, it used to be done by people driving around and walking around and simply making a score and writing it down. And, you know, the person who's doing Nelson Street might score that a little differently than the person doing Barry Street. And so the idea was there's new AI go through with LiDAR scan, and AI will score everything. And that way it's consistent. And it's kind of a new and innovative thing. And so they wanted to get a grant to help cover the cost of the initial one. So that way they could see if it would be good. And from the state perspective, and they did fund it, and we did do the project. The state perspective was, if this works, this is something that can be piloted and transitioned to other communities. So other communities that don't have the resources might be able to, they might not have the staff to be able to go and do their own PCI, but they could pay, if they know the cost, they could be able to hire a firm to go and do it. So that was one that was a couple of years ago. We did a lot of these, we did 2 of these for zoning, the big zoning update. I don't think we could, we used this for the downtown streetscape. So we did do a master plan, a streetscape master plan for the downtown. And we used a municipal planning grant for that as well to pay the consultant. It didn't cover the whole project cost, but it covered a portion of it. So yeah, usually it's things that are directly related to you guys, zoning updates, specific plans, housing plans, if we wanted to do a housing plan, or can't remember if we used it for the design review. We had some design review work that we were doing. I know they did a CLG grant, certified local government grant for that, but I don't know if it also had a municipal planning grant component to it.
So I have a series of quick questions, and I apologize. I know that you've explained this to me before, but this happens infrequently enough that I forget everything about it. Who does the application go to?
ACCD,
Okay.
Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
All right, and then the grants, are they block grants or are they project specific grants?
They're project specific.
Okay, so in that case, one, what's the size of the grant that we're looking for to do the TIF work that you're talking about? And secondly, are there alternative sort of projects that your office was sort of considering it as an alternative to this? I just want to know kind of what the menu of possibilities are.
Yeah, I mean, another option that we were looking at for a grant would be so I think the maximum grant, we'd probably apply for whatever the maximum grant is, understanding that if we got knocked down and only got partially funded, we would take the partial funding, because we do have some money that we can put towards the TIF, but the TIF application's $50,000 to $60,000, and I think we have 40. So if we could at least get 20, we'll help to cover that gap. The other projects we had been thinking about, everyone remembers, you know, in the flood in 23, my office was flooded. I was in the basement. We had all of our files, boxes and boxes and boxes of files, and they all got soaked. So everything got wet. So we shipped them all to Massachusetts, where they had a freeze dryer, and that's what they do for a living. And they freeze dried all of the documents, but to get them there, we just grab them and drop them into boxes and send them out, drop them. So there's no organized, there's no labelings, there's no nothing. They're just boxes and boxes of 150 boxes of all of our permits from the past 40 years. So when people come in to do research, they usually would come in and pull the files and see if there were any permits that were pulled and be able to document them. Well, we're trying to go for a paperless. We now have a paperless by force, and now all of our stuff going forward, we scan in and it's in our database. So everything is now digital. We don't have any paper copies going forward, but we still have 150 cases of permits that need to get scanned and put into the database. one of the options was, geez, we could get a municipal planning grant, maybe help to get that up to date and get those in. But we haven't done enough of the background work to kind of get an idea. I mean, we could just randomly say, do as much as we could do for the amount of money that we've got. We can't do it with our own staff. There's just not enough time. It's just hasn't been working out to be able to do it that way. So we would like to see, we did have our Nick replaced Audra. Audra had been here for 17 years. We kind of hope maybe we get Audra during the winter, pay her a little bit to come in. We all just experienced what was in our budget. So our budget, we lost many people, lots of vacant positions were cut. So we didn't lose any money in planning, but we still, it's a tight budget environment and would be inappropriate for us to go and ask for additional money for my department when other departments are getting cut. So the thought was maybe we could apply for a grant and maybe municipal planning grant. So that was the other big topic, but we just didn't really have an idea of, we didn't know if she'd be available. We don't know. We were hoping that we'd get her in for a little bit to go through and run through, do a box, tell me how long it takes. Then I can multiply box times this and have an idea of this is how much money I need to actually do the project. But we also can just simply go in and say, let's do as much as we can. We got $20,000, see how many boxes we can get through, or we got $30,000, let's see how many boxes we can get through. But it's important to do it right. So we can't just go and, we'll just get volunteers, or we'll just get an intern, or we just get, because if they're not linked to the right place, then it's really not useful. The point is to make sure we can also go through and that's why we were hoping to get Audra to be able to go through and say, this doesn't matter. We don't need this. We don't need this, but we need this. And that way we can also kind of shrink the pile a little bit, make it go a little bit faster if we've got somebody who knows what they're doing and is familiar with all the information. So that was a little bit, probably the second biggest thing that we do really want to be able to do at some point. It's just a matter of how do we crack the nut on that one. So that would be the other big one. But yeah, making sure we've got the resources we need to get Country Club Road is, that is far and away, the number one priority the city council has, create more housing. So that was why we put the TIF at the top of the list.
Sure. So one last question then. So absent the grant, do you have a sense of how you close the cost gap to get that TIF application done?
Not yet. We all kind of sit there and hope that, it's like, well, we got maybe that local options, we can close the gap with that. I mean, initially we had gotten $500,000 for Country Club Road. Only 150 of it went to actually advancing the city project. We were hoping all 500,000 would be left to the Country Club Road, but it didn't work out that way. We only got 150 of it. So that's kind of shortened that out a little bit. Our hope is that there'll be additional resources somewhere along the way that would fill that $20,000 gap. Sometimes you have a good year. This isn't one of them. So sometimes, and that's just because you get a snowy year, and it's not like one big snowstorm. It's been 30 small snowstorms. So DPW has everybody working overtime. And so that just means there isn't going to be extra money at the end of this year. Unlike other years, some years we have extra money simply because DPW didn't have a lot of snow days. We didn't get a lot of water main breaks, so there's not a lot of overtime. The budgets are built to assume a certain amount of overtime. So sometimes the years come to an end and the auditors come in and say, you guys ended the year in the black, $150,000. This year won't be one of those, unfortunately.
I think the TIF work makes a lot of sense. I'm a little bit concerned that I look at things somewhat cynically, and I'm a little bit concerned that we don't get ourselves there to a point where the TIF is moving forward. And then what happens with the grant money, for instance? It sounds like it goes away if it's project specific.
Yeah,
So I
we'll
think
roll
that's
back. Yeah.
I think that's my one concern there.
Yep. My expectation is the TIF work is going to have to be done. So whether it's, there are a couple of different avenues for getting in there. the most straightforward is the one that we're working on right now, which is get the growth center approved, and then we're eligible for the TIF. But we have other avenues that we're going to try to look at. The governor's looking at there are a bunch of laws that are being proposed right now at the legislature, because the number one thing it sounds like the administration is trying to push for is making sure utilities, that municipalities have the resources they need to make the utility upgrades that are necessary to make housing. Basically, what they're learning is we change all the zoning for housing and nothing happens, and all the municipalities say, well, because there's no sewer and water capacity in a lot of the villages. And that's where we want to have the development, and it can't happen. So now the push is, okay, well, let's shift in, let's get a lot of resources in that direction. So that's one of the things they're trying to do, is to try to make it easier to do TIF districts. Whether that gets through, if that gets through, then we don't need the growth center. We're still going to do it because it's going to help us becoming a tier 1A community down the line, all the Act 250 stuff. So we would still obviously do it, but we'll keep an eye on the legislation. If nothing comes through, then the only option we have is the growth center.
Yeah, I'm just noticing that it's 7:22, and so since this is due the end of March, do you need a motion from us, and does it have to be specific to what you apply for, or?
I mean, I think it helps
Or,
just
yeah,
to keep
I
people
guess-
from,
How would you?
I mean, for me to put together the application.
But you
yes.
need our approval.
Yeah, we should have a motion to approve, because you're going to have to sign it
Okay,
at some point. So,
okay.
I would probably work up the document and then get the resolution on your next agenda. So we might be able to approve it at the next agenda as well at the hearing, but we just have to
Well-
make sure we don't get ourselves sidetracked too much. Yeah, we would
Yeah.
have to at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
I mean,
Yeah, to be before the end of the thing, I'd have to have the resolution.
feels comfortable moving it at this meeting. I think that makes sense. And then, you can work on it. We don't have to worry about it at the public hearing.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone wants.
So I would move to authorize application for the grant, I think specific to the TIF project that you spoke about.
Second.
Some, all those in favor?
I
Great.
All right, so the discussion of this year's work plan. So Maria sent out a quick note to you guys about if you guys had any different questions or ideas about what to do. Gabe sent back, he's not here, but he did send back a reply that said, there are a couple of zoning things that he thought would be valuable to work on. So rather than have the conversation, because I think the question was, do we want to put on an agenda item to talk about it? And so my thought was, well, because we know we've got a public hearing coming up, we've got stuff coming up, let's just think about, and between now and whenever we finish the public hearings, continue to think about what are some topics, where do we want to go next? And Gabe's ideas, he had some that have come up a number of times about making some zoning amendments. And I think we have in our office a punch list of zoning changes we haven't done. I think the last one we did was April of last year. So usually we would be working on a zoning update by now. So, but it sounded like from him, we should have more of a conversation on some of these very specific topics that seem to be hanging up projects. And so that's probably a good topic to bring up whenever the public hearings are done. But if anyone else has any other ideas of things that, hey, can we look at, or do you want to look at?
I agree with that. And I think, the zoning is an interest of mine. I wasn't around for the last year's process, so I'm excited to jump into that. And I'll likely have some thoughts to put forth as well there too.
So Mark, is your office planning on any zoning amendments this year?
Yeah, we have a couple of anytime we see things that come up in a hearing, we'll be like, oh, that word's wrong, or this is wrong, or this is really unclear. We should have that clarified. So yeah, we do have a list. It's a small list. I mean, it's probably a half dozen small changes that we would propose, but there are always opportunities to do bigger things. We do have lists out there of, boy, those subdivision regulations, they've been bad since we adopted this. Maybe we should go through and do a big review of that. That would be a much bigger lift, but I think we can certainly sit down and have a conversation and put all the things on the table and then decide, do we want to do a really, take a scalpel to this, or do we want to kind of open it up and take some bigger topics?
And even your small edits would still have to go through city council.
Oh, yeah. Yep. It would be a full process. There will be some other smaller things that'll come up throughout the year. As Stephen Whitaker has pointed out many times, for the growth center application, we need to have a capital budget, and it has to be one of the capital budgets approved under the 4430 statutory process, which requires the planning commission to adopt and approve that. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I don't think it's going to take a long time. I've already been talking to the state about it, about what they would expect in that. And I said, capital budgets can be anything. They can be Excel spreadsheets. They can, but they also can be very narrative. And a lot of these types of ones end up being narrative because it's what are the costs? And we can lay out the $18 million of costs to build out Country Club Road. And how are we going to pay for it? And here are the programs we're going to use to pay for it. And it's, and the rough timeline that we expect that these will go through and what grants we would be applying for. And so it's less of what you might think of, or that somebody might expect, like a capital budget would be, sometimes it's like, oh, we're replacing cruiser number 1 in 2027 and cruiser number 2 in 2029 and cruiser number 3. And then you've got this big long table that goes out for 10 years and it maps out where all the capital equipment, all the capital improvements, when are we paving this street? There's a lot to it. But for our growth center application, it only applies to those areas that are in the newly expanded growth area. So in this case, that would be just Country Club Road, because the other areas already have all the things they need for their capital budget. And the other ones would just have to show where and how we would add sidewalks to those. So, and we'll have those conversations as well, but I don't think that'll take a lot of time, and certainly not a lot of your time. It will be a public hearing that'll come up. It's something I'll develop. We'll have a hearing on it. But I think your time would probably be spent doing a lot of the zoning, unless, like you said, there's other things that come up that a topic of interest, something in the city plan that you want to follow up on. We can, we can talk about when we want to.
Now, when the city plan is approved, putting it to bed for a couple months.
Yes, I don't want to hear city plan until after Christmas.
Okay, great. I have to leave in a few minutes, but do we want to look at these minutes real quick and then adjourn? I don't think that Leah and Tim were at this last meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so anyone wants to move approval with those members reviewed? I think the minutes are pretty short.
Yeah, I'm.
Great.
I can second.
Okay, all those in favor?
John,
Great.
I-
Okay, and if anyone wants to adjourn.
Second.
thank you, Aaron.
I.
Sean,
Okay, great. Thanks,
vote with
everyone.
your feet.
And Aaron, did anything ever come of the WCX?
Oh, you know
You
what?
missed it. It was like a 2-hour, like real heavy. No, we haven't.
She actually called me.
Oh, she did
She
call you?
called me this afternoon, but I didn't know it was her.